Hi, welcome back to another video with me, Teacher Mike from Phuket PALS. This video is about RLA reading, and this is going to be about the double passage question. Lots of students don't like this one. There's a lot of reading to do, but I want to show you what it looks like in this video, how to approach some of the questions and how to get the answers right as well, hopefully. Enjoy. Here we go. Let's dig straight into the article itself. It says, excerpt adapted from the dangers of the proposal of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to introduce grizzly bears into Idaho. A speech to the U.S. House of Representatives, July 1997, by Congresswoman Helen Chenoweth. Okay, and there it is, as you can see. We'll move down a bit, and you'll see the second excerpt from the final Environmental Impact Statement, EIS, released on introduction of grizzly bears in the Bitterroot ecosystem in western Montana and central Idaho 2000 by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Okay, now first thing I would notice about those two, the two passages, is that the first one is a speech by a congresswoman. Now that speech is probably going to be filled full of opinion, whereas the second article is by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's much more likely to be full of facts, more objective facts. So the first one's more likely to be kind of persuasive in nature, more emotional, whereas the second one should be more objective and fact-filled. That's the first thing I would pick up on. So when you get these double passages, you should kind of think about the source. Think about where, who is the person speaking, and why are they speaking, for one, and also, is this going to be opinion-based or persuasive, or is it going to be just factual, or what? Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's just go down to the first question. Okay, number 7. What is Congresswoman Chenoweth's viewpoint? So obviously we have to read Congress Chenoweth's speech to find out what her viewpoint is, what her opinion is. So let's have a look. Miss Congresswoman Chenoweth, there it is. Okay, so let's have a read together. Remember, this is a speech in the U.S. House of Representatives. Paragraph 1. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has prepared a plan to introduce grizzly bears into a huge part of my district. Let me explain to the members that this would affect a significant portion of the state of Idaho. The area we're talking about is 1/3 of the state. Just to give members an idea about how big this area is, let me give a comparison. In this area, we could fit the states of Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island, and still have over 1 million unfilled acres. You should be aware that the area we're talking about contains many populated regions, including the area around the University of Idaho. Moreover, the border of the Grizzly Bear recovery area, runs very close to Boise. Okay, so that's the first paragraph or so, and she's just kind of outlining the size of the area that would be affected by the grizzly bear release, and also making comparisons there to how many states could be contained within that area. Just trying to be a bit more persuasive there by using comparison and getting people thinking a bit. The grizzly bear is a huge and dangerous animal. Okay, so there we're looking for her viewpoint here. Don't forget. So there's a direct example of her viewpoint. The grizzly bear is a huge and dangerous animal, which makes for us a huge and dangerous problem. Okay, so she's very explicit there with her opinion. The grizzly bear is a large predatory animal and provoked or unprovoked, it can move very quickly to viciously attack a human or an animal. In addition, the grizzly has special dietary needs. Just one of them requires between 10 and 168 square miles of land to live on, depending on the amount of food there is in that area. Okay, so paragraph 2, she tells us, she says they're dangerous. Grizzly bears are dangerous. She says they're ferocious, so you don't want to get in the way of them, and also they need a large land area to live. Paragraph 3, bringing back the unpredictable grizzly, okay, unpredictable, that's part of her viewpoint, grizzly bear, means that people will not be able to behave or work in the way they used to in this part of Idaho. Roads normally open will have to be shut down. Hiking trails will be restricted. Camping areas will be closed. Hunting will be restricted. Livestock and logging practices will be dramatically altered. Bringing back the grizzly bear is like allowing wildlife to take over. Okay, so her opinion here is that the impact of releasing grizzly bears back into the wild is that it will affect kind of all aspects of that society. It'll affect the infrastructure, so roads. It'll affect hiking trails, camping areas, livestock practices. So it'll affect all important and all elements of the society. It'll have a detrimental impact on that. Number 4, that's her opinion, of course. Okay. Number 4, it's a well-known fact that grizzly bears are often violent towards humans and animals. Okay, so she's used up here calling them unpredictable. Up here, she's talked about them being vicious. Here we are. And also about them being predatory. Talking about unprovoked attacks. So there's a bit of a theme going on here. She's trying to push the idea that they are very dangerous. It's a well-known fact that grizzly bears are often violent towards humans and animals. While settlers may have recognized the beauty of these animals, they also understood the horrible threat they pose. Okay, so they pose a threat. We have a continuation of this danger element within her opinion. At the time, there was no federal act to keep them from killing these animals. Thank goodness, Lewis and Clark described in their journals the absolute terror that they and the Indians had for these animals and how difficult it was to kill a grizzly, even with several shots fired from their 18th century guns. When I presented to the Fish and Wildlife Service these types of concerns about human risk, they too recognized the dangers of grizzly bears. In the past few years, because more people are vacationing in our forests and lands, attacks have increased. Even with this plan, the Fish and Wildlife Service estimates there could be about 1 human injury or death each year. Let me say for the record, Mr. Speaker, not 1 human death or injury resulting from a grizzly bear attack is acceptable to this Congresswoman. In fact, it should not be acceptable to anyone who values human life. All right, so the Congresswoman is pretty clear there with how she feels. Let's see if we can answer the question. Number 7, what is Congresswoman Chenoweth's viewpoint? Is it A, grizzly bears should be reintroduced to the states, into states other than Idaho in a slow and orderly manner? No, she does not believe they should be reintroduced. She's completely against it. B, grizzly bears should be introduced into Idaho at the discretion of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Again, it's a big no-no. She does not think they should be introduced or reintroduced, whatever. C, grizzly bears should not be introduced into Idaho or any part of the country because they're ferocious. Okay, well, ferocious means very, very angry and dangerous, so it's probably that one. D, grizzly bears should not be reintroduced into Idaho in the way that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has planned. Okay, so some students might go for D there, but it's not, because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as we will find out when we read that article as well, they want to reintroduce the population slowly and over a number of years. So the Congresswoman wouldn't agree with that either. She thinks they should not be reintroduced at all. And she believes they're very, very dangerous. So the answer must be C then. Grizzly bears should not be reintroduced into Idaho or any other part of the country because they are ferocious. Yes, C is the answer there for sure. Moved on. Number 8. Why does Congresswoman Chenoweth compare the area that is to be used for the reintroduction of grizzly bears to the states of Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island? Okay. A, she's stressing how large an area it is in contrast to these states. Okay, well, it's probably that. Probably that answer, I would say. B, she's suggesting these states are smaller in size than Idaho. No, she's not suggesting that. That's not why she makes the comparison. She doesn't make the comparison to show how small these states are in comparison. It's definitely not that idea. What she's doing is, by mentioning, when she compares the area into which the grizzly bears would be reintroduced, to the areas of these states, she's just showing how massive the area in Idaho is, because it's like a combined size of all these states put together. So it's probably B here. C, she wants sorry, it's probably A. I apologize. It's probably A. C, she wants everyone to know that there are no grizzlies in these states. Absolutely, that's nothing to do with what we're talking about. She wants to stress that states in the East Coast don't have much wildlife. Nonsense, doesn't make sense. Okay, it must be A here. She's stressing how large an area it is in contrast to these states. Yeah, so by comparing all these states and their sizes combined to the size of the area in Idaho in which they want to release the grizzly bears, she's just showing how massive the area actually is. So it's A. The answer is A there. Number 9. What is the reason that Congresswoman Chenoweth mentions the Lewis and Clark journals? Okay, so number 9. To show that even Lewis and Clark were frightened of the grizzlies? Could be. To suggest that Lewis and Clark knew very little about grizzlies? No, because she mentions that they and the Indians knew how dangerous these animals were. So Lewis and Clark, based on their exploration of the country, they definitely would have encountered plenty of grizzlies at that time. So they definitely would have known about them. C, to show that she is knowledgeable about Lewis and Clark? Definitely not. That's irrelevant. To suggest that the US Fish and Wildlife Services should read the journals? She's not suggesting anything of the sort. Lewis and Clark, being intrepid travelers, even they and the Native Indians, the Native Americans, I should say, where it mentions they were both frightened of the grizzlies. So that's just the Congresswoman just making a comparison to, if these people were afraid of them, imagine how people today would feel. The answer is A there. Number 10. According to the environmental impact statement. Okay, well, we haven't read that yet. So let's go back up to the environmental impact statement. Here it is. Let's read. Excerpt from the final environment impact statement, EIS, released on reintroduction of grizzly bears in the Bitterroot ecosystem in western Montana and central Idaho 2000 by the US Fish and Wildlife Service. 1. The purpose of reintroducing grizzlies would be to enhance the species' potential for recovery in the lower 48 states. An estimated 50,000 grizzly bears lived in the United States prior to the European settlement. Grizzly bears have been eliminated from approximately 98% of their historic range in the lower 48 states. Today, approximately 1,000 to 1,100 grizzly bears remain in 5 scattered populations in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Washington. Only 2 areas of the country, the Yellowstone ecosystem and the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, which includes the Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness, have populations of several hundred grizzlies. The other 3 populations have approximately 5 to 50 grizzly bears each. The grizzly bear is a native species of the Bitterroot ecosystem and was once common there. Grizzlies were eliminated from the Bitterroots by the 1940s after a century of intensive persecution. Of all remaining unoccupied grizzly bear habitat in the lower 48 states, the Bitterroot Mountains Wilderness area has the best potential for grizzly bear recovery. The last area has the components of quality grizzly bear habitat. As such, the Bitterroot ecosystem offers excellent potential to recover a healthy population of grizzly bears and to boost long-term survival and recovery prospects for the species in the United States. Recovery of endangered species and their removal from the list of endangered species is the ultimate goal of the Endangered Species Act. Under the plan outlined in the EIS, the service would reintroduce a minimum of 25 grizzly bears into the 25,140 square miles of the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness over a period of 5 years. The bears would be taken from areas in Canada and the United States that have healthy populations of grizzly bears, living in habitats similar to those found in the Bitterroot ecosystem. All reintroduced bears would be radio collared and monitored to determine their movements and how they use their habitat, and to keep the public informed through media outreach of general bear locations and recovery efforts. Under the plan, the service would only consider bears with no known history of conflicts with people for reintroduction. Suitable bears would be released at remote wilderness sites within the Bitterroot Mountains of east central Idaho that have high bear quality habitat and low likelihood of human encounters. By designating the reintroduced grizzly population as non-essential experimental, bears that frequent areas of high human use, act aggressively towards humans, or attack livestock would be relocated or destroyed based on actions at the Interagency Grizzly Bear Guidelines. Okay, so that's quite, as you can see, very well. They're just trying to, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You can see that they want to reintroduce the grizzly to stop its to boost numbers of its species in the wild, and they're trying to do it in a very isolated area of Idaho, and because it's the perfect natural habitat for these animals, and they're kind of trying to justify their idea via this document. Okay, so let's have a look at the question then. According to the environmental impact statement, what is the purpose of reintroducing grizzlies into the environment? Is it A, to study the bears, B, to make the bears tamer, C, to increase the number of bears, or D, to improve the bears' environment? That's an easy one. It has to be C, to increase the bears' numbers. Okay, they're trying to boost the numbers of the species in an area in which they feel there'll be minimal human impact on humans. 11. Which quotation from the environmental impact statement supports the underlying premise that grizzlies might pose a hazard to humans when introduced? Let's see, a hazard to humans when reintroduced. Grizzly bears have been eliminated from approximately 98% of their historic range in the lower 48 states. Okay, so that doesn't support the idea that they might be a hazard. Okay, it doesn't a hazard to humans. B, grizzlies were eliminated from Bitterroots by the 1940s. Again, there's nothing about effect on humans there. All reintroduced bears would be radio-collared and monitored to determine their movements and how they use their habitat, and keep the general public informed through media. Okay, to media outreach and general bear locations and recovery efforts. Again, okay, it does mention the general public there, but it's not so much about posing a threat to humans. They're saying there how they'd be radio-collared and monitored, therefore not so much of a threat to humans, being an eye being kept on them by the authorities. D, by designing and reintroducing the grizzly population as non-essential experiment, bears that frequent areas of high human use, act aggressively towards humans, or attack livestock would be relocated or destroyed based on the actions in the Interagency Grizzly Bear Guidelines. So D there. D talks about bears that frequent areas of high human use or act aggressively towards humans or attack livestock will be relocated or destroyed. So that's saying that they're saying in that quote that it's a possibility that this could happen. It's a possibility that humans might be attacked or killed by the grizzlies. So the authorities are just saying what they will do if this happens. So they're saying it's a possibility for sure. If the grizzlies do attack humans, they will be relocated or destroyed. So the answer is D there. 12, we have a little table. It says indicate where each sentence belongs in the chart. Okay, so in the real GED test, you would click on the sentence and drag it into the position in the chart. Okay, so what's it say? Congresswoman Chenoweth's speech, the final environmental impact statement. Okay, so first sentence, it's important to reintroduce grizzlies since they are endangered. Well, that would go over to the right to the final environmental impact statement. People's lives will be turned upside down because of the reintroduction of grizzlies in this part of Idaho. That will go over to Congresswoman Chenoweth because she's vehemently against the reintroduction of the grizzlies. The grizzlies will be carefully monitored and people will be alerted to their presence. That will go over again to the right. They talk about monitoring the grizzlies and letting people know when they're close to their property or whatever. The grizzly, yes, one person killed by a grizzly is too many. Well, that goes to the left again. Congresswoman Chenoweth says that at the end of her speech, that even one death for her is too much. Okay, so that's that done. Um, okay, number 13. In the conclusion of her speech, how does Congresswoman Chenoweth try to make an effective appeal to her listeners? Okay, so does she provide an objective overview of the project? No, she doesn't. She's not being objective at all about the project. Remember, objective means she's like has like a bird's eye view of it. She doesn't give opinions. She just states facts about it. And her speech is all opinion based, based on emotion. So it can't be A because her view is not objective. B, she stresses emotional issues regarding the reintroduction of grizzlies. Could be. C, she summarizes logical arguments made earlier in her speech. Or D, she helps her listeners understand the complexity of the project. Let's look again. How does Congresswoman Chenoweth try to make an effective appeal to her listeners in the conclusion of her speech? So let's go and look at the conclusion of her speech and see what is going on. Okay, here it is. Let me say for the record, Mr. Speaker, not one human death or injury resulting from a grizzly bear attack is acceptable to this Congresswoman. In fact, it should not be acceptable to anyone who values human life. Okay, so she's drawing upon ethics here, and she sees it as an ethical concern. Let's just see. What are we on? 13? She tries to make an effective. And how does Congresswoman Chenoweth try to make an effective appeal to her listeners? Yeah, I think the answer here, I think, is B. She stresses emotional issues regarding. Yeah, so she's kind of pulling on people's emotional heartstrings in that last paragraph by saying, anyone who cares about human life should care about what's going on here with the grizzlies. So I think it's B. C, she summarizes the logical arguments made earlier. No, she doesn't. Doesn't summarize any arguments made earlier. D, helps her listeners understand the complexity. No, she doesn't. It's nothing but complexity. Again, she's saying if you care about human life, then you should care about about grizzlies being reintroduced. So she's encouraging people to think ethically, and it's kind of an emotion-filled statement as well. So definitely B. She stresses emotional issues regarding the reintroduction of grizzlies. Okay, 14. How does the tone of the environmental impact statement differ from the tone of the speech? Okay, so it's a more factual tone than the speech has. I think it's A. A is B. The second one is definitely more factual. B has a more urgent tone. No. Urgent means immediate, like it has to happen now. And the second one doesn't have that tone. It's more objective and factual. C, it includes an emotional appeal. No, it doesn't. Okay, the second one is not emotional, it's factual. D, it uses stronger language than the speech does. No, the first one uses more emotive language, okay, a language that stirs up emotions within the listener or the reader in order to persuade them. So the answer must be A here, okay? It has a more factual tone than the speech. A is correct. 15, the environmental impact statement, EIS, includes data on the decline of grizzly populations because the EIS needs to show why grizzlies are considered dangerous by people. That's nothing about the decline of their population. B, explain the need for reintroducing grizzlies into the environment. I think it's B, because the whole point of the EIS statement is about boosting the grizzly population. So we're probably looking at B here. C, reassure the audience that grizzlies will become numerous again. Well, that's not the purpose. D, emphasize the amount of time that has passed since grizzlies were numerous. No, it doesn't relate at all. So the answer here is indeed B. So the EIS includes data on the decline of grizzly populations because it's trying to convince people of the need, the urgency, the urgent need for reintroducing grizzlies into this Idaho environment. Okay. 16. How do the different genres of a speech and of a government document, like the environmental impact statement, affect each text? Okay, so a speech is typically better organized than, well, it's not. You can't say that. Typically, that's a generalization. You can't make a claim such as that because, sometimes speeches are not better organized than the second type of document. B, arguments in a speech are more likely to be based on fact, while arguments in a speech are less likely to be based on fact and more likely to be based on emotive language that stirs emotions in the reader or listener. C, a speech allows for dramatic arguments, yes, while EIS is more factual and objective. Yes, must be C. A speech may contain current ideas, while an EIS is more likely to contain older ideas. Not necessarily. Okay, it could be the other way around as well. So the answer there is C. Okay, speech allows for dramatic arguments, emotive arguments, while the other document is more factual and objective. Yes, it is C. Okay, so I think that is it. That's all the questions from that double reading. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what to expect and the standard that's required. So I hope you found it useful, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. That's all from me, Teacher Mike. Have a good day. Bye-bye.